If the person you loved most destroyed your life, would you burn theirs down too? I used to think love was supposed to make you softer, calmer, like sinking into a warm bath after a long day. But with him, it felt like standing barefoot on the edge of a cliff, wind in my hair, knowing one wrong step could kill me. And I loved it. I loved him. His name was Adrian. 29, sharp smile, sharper mind. The kind of man who could talk his way into the VIP lounge without an invitation and make you think he belonged there more than the people who paid for entry. I met him at a charity gala I had no business attending. I was just a friend's plus one, hiding by the champagne table when he found me. He didn't just look at me, he studied me, like he was cataloging every nervous tick, every flicker of my eyes. And then he smiled, and I swear the air in that crowded hall felt thinner. Within minutes, I was laughing like we'd known each other for years. By the end of the night, he'd walked me home under a drizzle that should have ruined my hair, but instead made the city lights blur into something out of a dream. From that night, it was constant. Messages before I woke up, surprise visits, whispered promises in dark corners of bars. He told me I was the safest place he'd ever found. I told him I believed him, and I did believe him, until I found the message. It was a Tuesday, late, and he'd left his phone on my coffee table while he showered. I wasn't the kind of person to snoop. I wanted to be the kind of person who didn't snoop, but the screen lit up with a preview that froze my breath mid-chest. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was unforgettable. No name, no heart emoji, just enough to make my mind spiral. I remember sitting there, staring at it, telling myself it had to be a friend, a joke, something innocent. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone when I heard the water turn off. I put it back exactly where it had been. Forced. A smile when he came out in a towel and kissed him like nothing had happened. But in my head, something had shifted. A hairline fracture. I didn't know it yet, but that message was only the first shadow in a storm that would tear everything apart. And when the truth finally came out, Adrian would wish he'd never met me. Back then, the idea of Adrian hurting me felt impossible. He was the man who noticed when my shoelace came untied, who remembered how I liked my coffee, who called me bright girl when I solved a crossword before him. Our first few months were the kind of whirlwind romance people post about on Instagram, the kind that gets captioned with, "How did I get so lucky?" Trips to rooftop bars, stolen weekends at beach hotels, late-night drives just to watch the sunrise. He had this way of making every place feel like it was ours. Even a crowded subway. Once, while we were packed into a train car during rush hour, he leaned down and whispered, "If you vanished right now, I'd burn the whole city to find you." I laughed, but part of me believed him. Looking back, I realized he was studying me then. My schedule, my friends, my habits. At the time, it just felt like love. There were quirks that I brushed off because that's what you do when you're in too deep. Like how he hated when I went out without telling him first, or how his phone seemed to always be on silent when we were together. He said it was because he wanted to be fully present with me. I thought that was sweet. One night, we were out with friends, and a woman at the bar greeted him a little too warmly. He barely acknowledged her, brushing it off as someone from a past business meeting. I remember how tightly he held my hand after that, almost like he was staking a claim. I told myself he was just protective. I told myself I was lucky to have someone who cared so much. The truth is, I didn't want to see the signs. When you've built someone up as the love of your life, your mind will do mental gymnastics to keep the fantasy intact. But cracks don't stay hidden forever. And when the first one widened, it was because of a rumor I almost didn't believe. It started as a throwaway comment at brunch. A mutual friend, the kind who always seemed to know everyone's business, leaned in, lowered her voice, and said, "I saw Adrian the other night, but he wasn't with you." I laughed it off, trying to sound casual. Probably one of his work dinners. She hesitated. Maybe. But the way he was looking at her didn't seem like work. That should have been enough to send me spiraling, but I was still clinging to the version of him I wanted to believe in. I didn't even ask for details. I just smiled, changed the subject, and went home pretending the conversation never happened. But then it started piling up. A coworker mentioned seeing him at a bar with someone tall, blonde, and wearing a dress you'd never wear. He started working late more often, and when I offered to bring him dinner, he always had an excuse. Sometimes I'd catch a faint whiff of perfume on his jacket. Not mine. Something sharper, unfamiliar. It was like living with a puzzle that was missing just enough pieces to make me question everything. One night, after he fell asleep, I stared at his phone sitting on the nightstand. I told myself I wouldn't touch it, that I was better than that. But my chest was tight, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and before I realized it, I was holding it. Of course it was locked. He'd always claimed he didn't have a password because he had nothing to hide. Apparently that changed. The next day I asked him about the rumors, lightly like I was joking. His eyes narrowed, just a fraction. Then he laughed. "Babe, you know I'm yours. People love to stir shit up when they're jealous." I wanted to believe him. I almost did. Until a week later, when my friends sent me a photo. It was Adrian, in a dimly lit restaurant, leaning across the table toward a woman whose face I didn't recognize, his hand brushing hers in a way no just friends ever would. My stomach dropped. My skin went cold. And for the first time, the fantasy cracked wide open. But the real blow hadn't arrived yet. The photo haunted me for days. I'd zoom in on every pixel, the way his body leaned toward hers, the stupid little smirk on his face, the way her fingers curled ever so slightly toward his. It wasn't enough to destroy him yet, but it was enough to destroy me. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted more. Proof that would crush every excuse before he could form it. So I started watching, quietly, when he said he was going. To the gym, I checked the GPS tracker on the app we shared for safety. More often than not, he wasn't anywhere near the gym. When he said he was stuck in traffic, I'd hear faint laughter in the background of his calls. One night, when he swore he was out with the guys, I saw his car parked outside a small boutique hotel downtown. That was the night I stopped hoping I was wrong. The next evening, I told him I'd made dinner. Candlelight, his favorite pasta, a bottle of red we'd been saving. He came home grinning, kissed me like nothing was wrong. Halfway through the meal, I asked, "Who is she?" His fork paused midair. "What are you talking about?" "The woman at the hotel. The one you've been meeting instead of going to the gym. The one who sends you messages about nights you never spend with me." The color drained from his face. He tried to laugh it off at first, but I kept talking. Every detail I'd collected, every inconsistency he'd fed me, laid out on the table, like a crime scene. Finally, his facade cracked. "It's not what you think," he said, which is exactly what people say when it's exactly what you think. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. Her name was Marissa, and she wasn't some random fling from a bar. She was my friend. Not a best friend, not someone I saw every day, but close enough that she'd been in my apartment, sat on my couch, toasted drinks with me. That betrayal cut deeper than the infidelity itself, because now it wasn't just him. It was her too. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just looked at him for a long, cold moment and said, "We're done." I packed a bag that night, left without slamming the door. No screaming, no dramatic exit, just silence, because I knew something he didn't. I wasn't walking away to lick my wounds. I was walking away to plan. A week after I left, Adrian called. His voice was raw, almost pitiful. "I miss you. I messed up. Please, can we talk?" The old me would have hung up or screamed. The new me The me who had spent 7 nights imagining how to burn his life down kept her tone soft. Maybe. Let's meet. We met at a quiet coffee shop. He looked tired, stubble shadowing his jaw, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. I let him talk, let him spill rehearsed lines about regret and second chances. I didn't forgive him, but I pretended to. I told him I needed time and that maybe we could start fresh. Inside, my pulse was steady. This wasn't reconciliation. This was reconnaissance. I moved back in 2 weeks later. Not because I wanted him, because I wanted access. I started small, reading the papers on his desk when he was in the shower, scanning his emails while pretending to watch Netflix. He had deals in motion, delicate enough that one wrong whisper could sink them. Names, dates, amounts. I memorized everything. I learned his weak spots. The clients who were already suspicious of him, the friends who tolerated him only because of what he could offer, the half-truths he'd told people that could unravel with a single well-placed rumor. All the while, I played the role of the forgiving girlfriend. I laughed at his jokes, cooked his favorite meals, let him believe the slate was clean. In public, I was affectionate. In private, I was an archivist of his downfall. I even reached out to Marissa, carefully, cautiously. She thought I wanted closure. She was wrong. Every conversation with her was another thread I could pull later. She bragged without realizing it, telling me little details that painted the full picture of their affair. Adrian started to relax again, falling back into his old rhythm. That was perfect, because people guard their secrets when they feel threatened. But when they think they've been forgiven, that's when they leave everything lying around. By the time the pieces were in place, I had enough to ruin him 10 different ways, and I intended to use them all. By the time he realized something was wrong, it was already too late. The first move was quiet, a whisper into the right ear. I bumped into one of Adrian's clients at a networking event. Over wine, I mentioned, with just the right amount of hesitation, that Adrian had been under a lot of stress lately, and might not be able to deliver on his promises. I didn't accuse, I didn't elaborate. I let curiosity do the rest. Within a week, one of his deals stalled. Next, I planted a seed with one of his so-called friends, the kind who liked drama more than loyalty. Over coffee, I told her I'd heard something about him and a married woman, but that I didn't want to get involved. She promised to keep it to herself. I knew she wouldn't. By the end of the month, whispers about his unprofessional behavior and messy personal life were spreading in circles he couldn't afford to lose. Meanwhile, I tightened the noose financially. I convinced him to invest in a sure thing I knew would tank. Thanks to a tip I got from an old college acquaintance. I even used some of my own savings to make the deal look more legitimate. When it failed, it took a chunk of his money and a huge piece of his reputation with it. Marissa was my wild card. I never confronted her directly. Instead, I sent her a series of anonymous messages, just enough to make her paranoid that Adrian was talking about her behind her back. She started pulling away from him, making excuses not to meet. He noticed. "Everyone's acting weird lately," he said one night, pacing our kitchen. "Clients are cold, friends are distant, even Marissa—" He stopped, glancing at me, like he'd forgotten I wasn't supposed to know her name. I smiled. Maybe it's just a bad month. But inside, I was counting down. The final blow came in the form of a carefully timed leak. I took one of his more incriminating emails, a string that hinted at insider information and shady dealings, and sent it to a rival who'd been itching for an opportunity to take him down. Within days, his company launched an internal investigation. His phone lit up with calls he didn't answer, emails he couldn't spin. And the best part? Not a single person suspected me. To them, I was the loyal girlfriend standing by his side. To him, I was the only person left, he thought, he could trust. And soon I'd take even that away. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about destruction. It's slower, quieter than you expect, until the moment it isn't. The investigation at his company dragged him under first. They suspended him pending review, which in his industry might as well have been a public execution. Clients started pulling contracts. His inbox went from flooded to silent. Then came the social collapse. The friend who used to invite him to every event forgot to add him to the guest list. The group chats went strangely quiet. Even his gym buddies, the ones he always bragged about, stopped returning his calls. Marissa was the first to officially cut ties. She showed up at his apartment one afternoon, pale and furious, holding her phone like it was a weapon. "You told people about us," she spat. I was in the bedroom, door cracked just enough to watch. He denied it, of course. But she was already halfway out the door. That night, he sat on the couch staring at nothing, shoulders slumped. For the first time, I saw fear on his face. Not guilt, not regret, just raw animal panic. It got worse when his landlord served him an eviction notice. I'd known about the overdue rent weeks before he did. I'd been quietly redirecting payments he thought were handled. He started drinking more, staying out all night, then coming home smelling like stale beer and desperation. The sharp, confident man I'd fallen for had been replaced by someone unshaven, paranoid, and constantly muttering about how everyone's out to get me. I would sit beside him, hand on his knee, murmuring, "I'm sure it'll get better." It never did. By the end of the third month, Adrian had no job, no girlfriend, at least not one he could trust, no money, and no friends willing to stand by him. When he finally confronted me, it was almost pathetic. "Did you do this?" His voice was hoarse, eyes bloodshot. I tilted my head. "Do what?" "This," he said, gesturing at the wreckage of his life. "Everything." I smiled just enough for him to see it wasn't innocence. "I warned you, Adrian. You just didn't hear me." His face went pale. He didn't ask anything else. He just left. That was the last time I saw him in person. But it wasn't the end of the story. Because revenge, I learned, doesn't stop when the target disappears. For weeks after he left, the apartment felt unnervingly quiet. No slammed doors. No half-shouted phone calls from the other room. Just the hum of the fridge and my own breathing. You'd think I'd feel triumphant. And I did, at first. There's a certain satisfaction in knowing someone who tried to break you now sleeps in a bed of their own ashes. But revenge leaves strange echoes. I'd catch myself scrolling through his old photos, not because I missed him, but because I wanted to remember the face of the man who thought he was untouchable. Rumors about him didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. Someone claimed he'd moved to another city. Another said they'd seen him working in a dingy bar looking like hell. A friend of a friend swore they heard he was staying in his car. I didn't care which version was true. Then one night, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. Just a single sentence. "You did this to him, didn't you?" It was from Marissa. I didn't reply. I didn't block her either. I wanted her to sit with the question, to wonder if she was next. The truth? I'd already decided she was. Not in the same way. Hers would be slower, subtler, a dismantling. She wouldn't notice until it was too late. Some people will say, that makes me cruel. Maybe it does. But when you've been betrayed by the two people who smiled to your face while stabbing you in the back, cruel becomes a language you learn fluently. Do I regret it? No. Because Adrian taught me something valuable. That love and hate aren't opposites. They're neighbors with a paper-thin wall between them. And once that wall cracks, you can't always tell which side you're standing on. Some say revenge brings no peace. But for me, it was the only way.